Hello and welcome everyone to the second lecture of Udaan series under Indian Polity. So today we are going to talk about making of the Indian Constitution, the salient landmarks in the making of Indian Constitution, August of Cripps mission. All those facts are going to be understood or explained in a manner that you are able to ace your prelims 2025 with ease. Now Udaan series, if you are not aware of the Udaan series, we at PW Only IS English channel are covering these booklets of Udaan series in a lecture based manner. First of all, we are covering the polity based lectures. All the chapters of Indian polity insofar as the prelims is concerned will be covered in a very easy manner, easy to understand. In a lucid language we are going to cover these topics. Now for the PDF of this series, you can subscribe to the Telegram channel. Here is the QR code for the Telegram channel. You can scan the QR code to get the PDF. Every day the lecture happens at around 6 or 7 p.m. sharp. I cannot say sharp, but yes, around 6 to 7 p.m. the lecture will be made live. So you can stay tuned every day. You can align your timetable for the last 100 odd days towards prelims in a manner that you get hold of this series. I, Jatin Verma, am taking polity over here and some current affairs sections also. So we'll be taking care of Indian polity in a manner that you get hold of static as well as dynamic section. So let's begin with it. Important acts under the crown rule. Under the crown rule, a recap of the yesterday's lecture. The things that we had seen yesterday have been presented in a flow chart or mind map kind of a manner, but not missing out on the details. So the sentence might be a little longer, but you will get hold of the essence of the topic that is at hand. Government of India Act 1858, then Indian Councils Act 1861. All these things were covered in the yesterday's lecture. Now 1861 portfolio system was recognized, decentralization initiated with the presidencies of Madras and Bombay being restored their legislative powers. Indian Councils Act. Okay, so I have presented the yesterday's text based material in the flowchart manner so that you can quickly have a recapitulation of the things that we had covered in the yesterday's lecture, guys. So these things are there. Indirect election, Indian Councils Act 1892, it made a limited and indirect provision. Just a revision thing. Model Minto reforms 1989. All these things were covered in a very detailed manner insofar as prelims is concerned in the yesterday's lecture. So I'm sure the team at PW Only IS English must have created a playlist for you to watch these lectures in a serial order manner. Now, Government of India Act 1919, Government of India Act again 1935. Likewise, all these acts are there. Now, coming to the agenda for the class today, the making of the Constitution of India. Gandhiji in 1922 said that Swaraj can never be a gift from the British Parliament. For him, Swaraj meant self-realization. We should not be somewhere infatuated or attracted to the British language, English goods, English way of life. We should have our own way of life, the Indian way of life. The meaning of Swaraj was beyond the freedom from the British for Gandhiji. Okay, these words echoed later on after 24 years when India finally got independence at the first session of Constituent Assembly. These Gandhiji's words, the wishes of the people of India as expressed by Gandhiji through their freely chosen representatives were reflected in it. Now, Britishers had presented a white paper. Congress had rejected this white paper in 1933. We did not express, as it did not express the will of the people. So what is white paper? You should be knowing about it. Okay, demand for a constituent assembly was made a part of the Indian National Congress official policy only in 1934. Demand for a constituent assembly first appeared in the documents of Indian National Congress in 1934. The year is important, right? Now, white paper containing the proposals based on which the Government of India Bill or Government of India Act 1935 was framed. White paper carried the framework of formulation of Government of India Act 1935. It was rejected by the government. Okay. Congress Working Committee said the only satisfactory alternative to white paper is a constitution drawn up by the Constituent Assembly elected by the people of India on the basis of universal adult franchise, and if possible minorities, important minorities will also have their representatives elected exclusively by the electorate belonging to the minority. So Congress was open to the idea, but they wanted that now we want a constituent assembly. Emphasis was on constituent assembly. Even if the important minorities were to be given separate electorates, Congress was open to the idea. So first of all, my dear students, we are seeing the roots of the formation of our constitution. Then we will come to constituent assembly. Then we will see UPSC previous year questions related to this topic. After having gone through the lecture, I will make you go through the questions so that you can see for yourself the improvement, the grasping, the ability to solve the previous year questions. Every year 24, 23 consecutively questions have been asked, then 2021, then before that 2014, 13 and 12. Okay, in between these questions have been passed. Now that we are in the era of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, the Jubilee is being celebrated by the Prime Minister, 75 years of independence, etc. That is why these questions have been appearing in the consecutive years. So that is why this chapter, the important details become very, very important, right? In 1938, Jawaharlal Nehru, on behalf of Indian National Congress, declared that the Constitution of Free India must be framed without outside interference by a Constituent Assembly elected on the basis of universal adult franchise. Okay, this demand was reflected in the August offer, Cripps mission. Okay, Stanford Cripps, 1942, a member of the cabinet, came to India with Cripps as in the form of a Cripps mission or draft proposal. Cripps proposals were there. They said that independence would be given, Constituent Assembly would be formed after the World War ended. So Britishers had to postpone, India had to wait for some more time. Ultimately, with the end of the World War II, we saw that after 2 years we got the independence. Okay, so August offer came during the World War, right? August offer of 1940, 1942, but Cripps proposals had to face another challenge in the form of its rejection by Muslim League. So Muhammad Jinnah, Muslim League, they rejected the proposal. They said that we wanted India to be divided into two autonomous states with two separate constituent assemblies. Cripps mission was rejected. Cripps proposals were rejected by Muslim League led by Jinnah. 1946, the British government, Britain was then ruled by Labour Party. So they sent the parliamentary delegation to India that comprised 3 cabinet ministers of England. Their names though are not as important, but you should know why is it called as cabinet, because cabinet mission was, it comprised of 3 cabinet ministers of the Britain. The incorporation, the formation of a cabinet mission comprising of 3 ministers becomes important in itself. Because it shows the sincerity of the British this time towards the Indian cause, towards the Indian independence. Okay, this was termed as cabinet mission with the aim of assisting the Viceroy of India to set up a machinery by which Indians can devise their own constitution. Finally, a cabinet mission was sent to India. While it rejected the idea, cabinet mission in a way echoed or reflected the demands of Congress. It rejected the idea of 2 constituent assemblies. It put forth instead a scheme for the Constituent Assembly which more or less satisfied the Muslim League. What were the major proposals of the mission? Though that is a part of modern history, but I would not be doing justice with my job as Indian polity teacher. So we are mixing modern history plus polity. Okay, modern history plus polity wherever relevant for our purpose. The cabinet mission plan was out on May 16, 1946. Some of its major recommendations are: number 1, a Union of India which was to be empowered to deal with defense, foreign affairs and communications, 3 subjects initially. An undivided India and turned down, the mission is saying, cabinet mission is saying that they are okay, that they want undivided India. Okay, this was not acceptable. Turned down the Muslim League's demand for a separate Pakistan. It restricted the communal representation. So communal representation was also restricted by cabinet mission plan, 1946 plan. It provided that all the members of the interim cabinet would be Indians and there would be minimum interference by the Viceroy. So Viceroy, yesterday also when we were talking about 1935 Act or 1919 Act, especially 1935 Act, we saw that Viceroy was a caretaker to ensure the smooth transition of power in the last leg of British era. Okay, formation of the Constituent Assembly on democratic principle of democratic principle. So cabinet mission plan broadly reflected the demands of the Congress, Indian National Congress, right? Now, recommendations continued. Even today, this question is asked in the interview also. Recognition of Indian right to cede from Commonwealth. The British Commonwealth of Nations, that was a grouping of the erstwhile colonies of British era of British Raj under the Britain, formulated under the leadership of Britain. However, India has a right to sever the ties with the Commonwealth. That means India, if it is joining the Commonwealth, does not mean that it reflects adversely upon its independence. Okay. The Union government and legislature under the cabinet mission plan were to have limited powers dealing with finance, foreign affairs and communication. The Union would have the powers necessary to raise finances. Okay, thus the cabinet mission plan proposed a weak center. They did not have the powers to manage internal security, etc. Okay, so that ways a recipe for disaster if seen in the context of what would have happened. Balkanization of states, division of states into smaller states, as we see in the Eastern Europe, that would have happened. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and other leaders, Jawaharlal Nehru included, they resisted this idea of weak center. The only major problem of Indian National Congress with cabinet mission was that they were not agreeing with the idea of weak center. Okay, considering the Indian situation, considering the divide and rule tactics played by the Britishers. Okay, and considering more importantly the diversity of India. All subjects other than the union subjects and all the residuary powers would be vested with the provinces. Residuary powers would be vested with the provinces. But in the present day constitution, residuary powers are with the central government, with the union government. Okay, the princely states would retain all the subjects and all the residuary powers. So princely states were proposed to be given extra power, all sorts of powers, to the detriment of the Union Government of India, which was again not acceptable. Formation of a, and recommendations of the cabinet mission plan continuing, formation of a constituent assembly that comprises representatives of provincial assemblies and the princely states. So constituent assembly would comprise of both these layers, right? Each province had to be allotted a total number of seats in proportion to its population. Province will be given seats according to the population. So roughly 1 seat for 1 million, 1 seat for 10 lakh people was given. Later on we'll talk about that. Now the constituent assembly had to comprise of 293 members as per cabinet mission plan from the British provinces and 93 members from the princely states. 293 plus 93. Okay, total number of members in the constituent assembly. The representation of provincial legislatures to be split into 3 sections. Section A, Madras, UP, Central Provinces, Bombay, Bihar and Odisha. Section B, Punjab, Sindh, Northwest Frontier Province and Balochistan. Present day Pakistan it is in. Section C, Assam and Bengal. The present day West Bengal and Bangladesh, you can say. Now, the roots of the formation, again, cabinet mission plan rejected the idea of separate Pakistan, yet it grouped the provinces in a manner giving enough leeway that if later on Pakistan has to be carved out, it can be carved out. Okay, giving weightage to the idea of Pakistan because section B would get almost complete autonomy. See here, section B, mostly these were princely states. Okay, so they had complete autonomy. So that is why it left a leeway for Pakistan to be carved out at a later stage. So can we say that cabinet mission plan did not want Britishers to be blamed for the partition? Yes, the members of the cabinet mission plan in fact wanted to get rid of this kind of an allegation. But yes, they were again sowing the seeds of partition. Now, Congress accepted the proposals related to Constituent Assembly. But since Muslim League had been given disproportionate representation, so Congress rejected the idea of interim government. So because they have been given disproportionate representation, Muslim League might want to part away from the idea of united India, and they will have interim government also. So that is why Congress said that both the legislative majority, not the majority, Congress said that giving extra weightage to Muslim League in the Constituent Assembly and then giving interim government to Muslim League will not be right. Okay, Congress also rejected the idea of a weak center and division of India into smaller states. Congress was against decentralization and the idea was to have a strong center. The Muslim League first approved the plan, but when Congress declared that it could change the scheme, Congress unnecessarily revealed this idea. Congress said that because of the majority of the Congress in the Constituent Assembly, Congress ended up disclosing it to the Muslim League that they can change the plan through the majority in the Constituent Assembly. Because of this revelation by Congress, Muslim League became afraid. It became wary of the intentions of Congress in the Constituent Assembly. So they rejected the cabinet mission plan. Got it? Now, the roots again. On July 27, 1946, Muslim League met at Bombay, where Jinnah reiterated the demand for Pakistan as the only course left open to the Muslim League. July 29, 1946, a black day, the Muslims were retorted. Muslims were told by Jinnah to have a direct action, stop their work, don't go to work. August 16, 1946 was fixed as the direct action day. Okay, this is the black day in the history where Jinnah urged the Muslims to suspend all their business activities, to boycott in a way. Direct Action Day saw widespread violence with which Gandhiji was also not happy, violence in Calcutta of British India, etc., where Hindu and Muslims resorted to violence and causing manslaughter. Riots kind of a situation was observed. Now here, the coming to the last leg of the roots, then we will move into the interesting area where the Constituent Assembly will start. So stay tuned, just a few more slides to begin with the interesting things. The then Prime Minister of Britain, Clement Attlee, declared on February 20, 1947 in the House of Commons that British would quit India not later than 1948, June 1948. He also announced the appointment of Lord Mountbatten as the new Viceroy. The Indian Independence Act 1947 was drafted, or was the plan of Lord Mountbatten only. Lord Mountbatten succeeded Lord Wavell in India on March 24, 1947. He immediately began the procedure to transfer the power. On March 27, 1947, another dark day, Muslim League observed Pakistan Day, which resulted in riots, massacre and atrocities for both Hindus and Muslims. The interim government, which was in existence since 2 September, interim government was there. Okay, so they had failed in controlling the riots, and later uselessness of opposition of demand for a separate Pakistan by Muslim League was realized by the leaders of the interim government, including Nehru. Okay, so because of this violence and mayhem that occurred on March 24, 1947, the Muslim League, the leaders of India, they realized that okay, let us allow them to go ahead with their thing, right? Now, on June 3, 1947, Prime Minister Attlee announced the partition plan, or June 3 plan, in the House of Commons. The plan laid down the following provisions. Number one, the provincial legislative assemblies of Bengal and Punjab would meet in two parts separately, one representing Muslim majority districts and another representing Hindu majority districts, to decide by the vote on the matter of partition. Okay, in case of Northwest Frontier Province, in case of Sindh and Baluchistan, the provincial assemblies would take the decision. In case of Sindh and Baluchistan, the state legislative assemblies, just to make you understand, will take the decision. Right. Now, in case of Northwest Frontier Provision, Northwest Frontier Province, the decision had to be taken on the basis of referendum. So, referendum was to be held. A referendum was to be organized by the Sylhet region of Assam, organized in the Sylhet region of Assam, which was the Muslim majority area, Muslim dominated area. The paramount of the princely states will not be transferred to either of India or Pakistan. So these princely states, in theory, they would be independent. Okay, they would be sovereign when India is partitioned. So these princely states would later on had to be convinced by the first Home Minister Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel to join the dominion of India, to join the Indian side. Okay, so this is there. Now coming to this part, the Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly was constituted in November 1946 under the scheme formulated by Cabinet Mission Plan. Cabinet Mission Plan, you have heard of it. 3 ministers of the British Parliament, okay, British government. These members were to be elected. Now, the members for the Constituent Assembly were to be elected by the members of provincial assemblies, the British part, the British ruled part, who themselves were elected on a limited franchise, which was based on tax. Anybody who was paying tax, anybody who had property in the region, and anybody who was educated in a limited manner would only cast the vote to choose the members of provincial assemblies, who in turn will choose the members of the Constituent Assembly. Got it? Members of the Constituent Assembly will be chosen by the members of provincial assemblies. These members of provincial assemblies will in turn be chosen by limited franchise, not the universal adult franchise. Everybody was not casting the vote. So this becomes the criticism of the Constituent Assembly, that it was not a directly elected body. Constituent Assembly included all the personalities of India at that time. The only missing persons were Gandhiji and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Okay, Dr. Sachidanand Sinha was the temporary president of Assembly. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the president of Constituent Assembly. H.C. Mukherjee, the vice president of Constituent Assembly, and B.N. Rao, the advisor to Constituent Assembly. B.N. Rao compiled the data from n number of constitutions. The features that we have borrowed in the constitution, all those beautiful things were compiled by B.N. Rao, who ultimately advised to the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, right? So these things were there. There were 2 vice presidents. We are going to see the details later on. These now on this particular thing, the question has been asked. Okay, who was the temporary president? Who did the temporary president gave space to become the permanent president? Okay, so this question was asked. Now, what was the total strength of the Constituent Assembly? 389. Of these, 296 were to be allotted to British India and 93 to princely states. Points, the same statement or text we have seen in the previous slides also, but now here I have divided it into points for your convenience. Anybody who's reading it for the first time, appearing in Prelims 2025 for the first time, would find it convenient. I could have further reduced the text, but for that thing to happen, we will come up with the marathon classes of Indian polity at a later stage, which will help you get command over, where you will see lesser text and points only for revision, trigger points only, which will help you recapitulate, revise everything by looking at just one particular keyword. For example, August offer, cabinet mission plan, sequence of these plans, etc. Out of 296 seats allotted to the British India, 292 members were to be drawn from the 11 governors provinces and 4 from the 4 chief commissioners provinces, 1 from each. 4 provinces, 4 from the chief commissioners provinces, 1 each from each of these 4 provinces. Okay. 296 allotted to British India, 292 members were to be drawn from 11 governors provinces. Each province and princely state was to be allotted seats in proportion to their respective population. Roughly 1 seat for every 10 lakh people, for every million of population was allotted to princely states. Clear? 93 seats in total to princely states. Now, seats allotted to each British province were to be divided among three principal communities: Muslims, Sikhs, and General. All except Muslims and Sikhs. Okay. General here means everybody except Muslims and Sikhs were to be given seats in proportion to their population. Single transferable vote. The representatives of each community were to be elected by the members of that community in the provincial legislative assembly, and voting was to be held by the proportional representation method. Everybody having franchise will have a single vote. Okay. Single transferable vote. Now, the representatives of princely states were to be nominated by the heads of the princely states. The representatives of princely states will not be elected because princes or kings are there, the rajas and maharajas, rajwadas are there to nominate those members. Got it? The elections to Constituent Assembly for 296 seats allotted to British provinces were held in July-August 1947 as per Muslim, Sikhs and general transfer of or distribution of votes. Now, Indian National Congress won 208 seats out of this, Muslim League 73 seats, and the small groups and independents got remaining 15 seats. Princely states did not participate in the election in the first go. However, the 93 seats allotted to the princely states were not filled as they decided to stay away from the Constituent Assembly. These kingdoms, princely states as we call them, they wanted to maintain their own power, hegemony over their territory. That is why they did not want to be the part of India. Ultimately, when partition of India happened, majority of them chose to be on the side of India. Junagadh, etc., had to see action from, or not so gentle persuasion from, the first home minister, who is called as the Iron Man, okay, of India. So Iron Will, or who was behind the unification of India after it got independence. Now, although the Constituent Assembly was not directly elected by the people of India on the basis of universal adult franchise, assembly comprised of the representatives from all the sections of Indian society: Hindus, Muslims, Jains, Sikhs, Parsis, even Anglo-Indians, and women from all these sections were also a part of the assembly. Okay, only missing personality was Gandhi ji, as we've seen earlier also. Okay, so Gandhi ji decided to abstain. He did not want to be the part of all this. The first meeting of Constituent Assembly, held on December 9, 1946, was boycotted by Muslim League, and it insisted for a separate state of Pakistan. Both H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari were elected as the vice president of the assembly. In other words, assembly had two presidents. Okay, Constituent Assembly had two vice presidents, H.T. Krishnamachari and H.C. Mukherjee and V.T. Krishnamachari, right? Meetings of the assembly after partition, the assembly met in 11 sessions over the course of 11 months and 18 days to make the Constitution of India, Constitution of Sovereign India, right? 11 sittings, 11 months and 18 days. Now, what was the objectives resolution? Sometimes this question is asked, what was the content of objectives resolution? Objectives, what are the objectives in general sense? Objectives means something which will act as the guiding objective while drafting the constitution. Okay, objectives resolution on December 13, 1946, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru moved the historic objectives resolution in the assembly. It laid the fundamentals and philosophy of the constitutional structure, which reflects today in the preamble to the Constitution of India. Number one, sovereignty. India would be a sovereign independent republic. Reflects in the preamble? Yes, sir. Democracy, India would be a democratic country. Okay. Equality, all the citizens would be guaranteed equality before law, equality of opportunity and of status. Justice, all citizens would be guaranteed not just political justice but social, economic and political justice. Freedom, all citizens would be guaranteed freedom, fundamental freedoms including the freedom of expression, freedom of religion, belief, worship and freedom of association. association in the form of political parties, association in the form of unions, trade unions, etc. All this reflects in our preamble. Now, protection, minorities will be given protection, scheduled tribes and depressed classes would be protected, Schedule 5 and Schedule 6 areas. World peace, India would work for the world peace and welfare of all the mankind. Atithi Devo Bhava, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Okay, that means world is a family. We till this day, even to this day, we preach these principles. Territorial integrity, the territorial integrity of India would be preserved. Ninth, constitution. The constitution would derive authority from the people of India. Done? Now, Mountbatten Plan, June 1947. The representatives of princely states who had earlier stayed away from joining the Constituent Assembly, they gradually joined it, because on April 28, 1947, representatives of 6 states were a part of the assembly. After the acceptance of Mountbatten Plan of June 3, 1947, Mountbatten Plan, June 3, for a partition of the country, the representatives of most of the other princely states took their seats in the assembly. Because partition had happened, the members of the Muslim League from Indian Dominion also entered the assembly. Now, those members of the Muslim League who belonged to the part of Muslim League, who belonged to that part of Muslim areas which stayed in India, which remained with India, those members of Muslim League also joined Indian Constituent Assembly. The part that went to Pakistan, for that part, those members of Muslim League sat in the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. These members which belong to the territorial part of India, they sat in India logically. Okay. The India Independence Act of 1947 made the following 3 changes in the position of assembly. The assembly was made a fully sovereign body which could frame any constitution it pleased, it wanted to. Okay, no foreign power will interfere. The act empowered the assembly. Indian Independence Act of 1947 empowered the assembly to abrogate or alter any law made by the British Parliament. Whatever laws were made by the British Parliament while it was ruling over India can be deleted, in literal sense, can be deleted or abrogated or altered by the Constituent Assembly insofar as that laws, British era laws, application to India is concerned. Number 2, assembly also became a legislative body. It can enact laws. Okay, in other words, assembly was performing 2 separate functions. The drafting of the constitution, function 1, the legislative function, the drafting and passing of the ordinary law bills, ordinary laws as we do it today. Okay, that function. Both these functions were performed on separate days. When the assembly, Constituent Assembly, was performing the first function, that of drafting the constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar used to chair the sittings. And when the assembly was performing the other function, that of legislative function, G.V. Mavalankar sir used to head the Constituent Assembly when it was sitting as legislative assembly, as a legislative body. Third, Muslim League members withdrew from the Constituent Assembly for India. Okay, those members of the Muslim League who belong to the territorial area of Pakistan, now carved out Pakistan, they left India for Pakistan. Now, strength of the Constituent Assembly. Consequently, the total strength of the assembly came down to 299 as against 389 originally. 296 plus 93 earlier, right? Now, originally fixed in 1946 under the Cabinet Mission Plan. The strength of Indian provinces was reduced from 296 to 229 and that of princely states from 93 to 70. Princely states ultimately had 70 seats after the partition. You should know this. Other functions performed in addition to making of the constitution, it ratified India's membership of Commonwealth. What other functions did Constituent Assembly perform? It ratified India's membership of Commonwealth of British, okay, Commonwealth of British Empire of India, British Empire of the world, whatever colonies they had in May 1942. Second, it adopted national flag on July 22, 1947. To this day also, even to this day, we celebrate this as a National Flag Day. Okay, now, it adopted the national anthem on January 24. It adopted the national song on January 24. It elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad as the first president of India on January 24, 1950. Republic. Until and unless we have our elected president, India would not be called as a republic, because representative of the public has to be there. That is why first we elected the president 24th January 1950. In all, Constituent Assembly had met for 11 sittings over a span of 11 months and 18 days. Okay, had gone through the constitutions of about 60 countries, and the draft constitution was considered for 114 days. How the constitution was considered, we will see that also. On January 24, 1950, the Constituent Assembly held its final session. It, however, did not end and continued as the Provincial Parliament of India from January 26, 1950 till the formation of the new Parliament after the first general elections of 1951-52. Okay. Now, who was the, have a look at the UPSC previous year question. Who was the provincial president of the Constituent Assembly before Dr. Rajendra Prasad took over? UPSC CSE 2024 prelims. As I said that we are celebrating 75, 76 years of our independence, etc. Okay, constitution, adoption of constitution, those things, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, etc. So that is why these questions have appeared in 2025, 2024, 2023, back to back. And another question in 2021 prelims. What was the exact constitutional status of India on 26th January? A democratic republic, a sovereign democratic republic, a sovereign secular democratic republic, a sovereign social secular republic. Can we call it as democratic republic? Okay, can we call it as sovereign? We were sovereign, but were we democratic? Because elections were not held. Okay, a sovereign secular democratic republic. Sovereign. Please answer in the comment section. I will reveal the answer after all of you have answered. Most of you have answered. Now, functioning of the Constituent Assembly. The functioning of the Constituent Assembly comprised setting up of committees, various committees, total approximately 22 in number, roughly 22 in number, these committees, out of which 8 were major committees and some 13 subcommittees were there, minor committees were there to advise upon the drafting committee on various things like fundamental rights, integration of princely states, powers of union and state. Likewise, all these matters were divided in the committees, amongst the committees to advise upon the drafting committee. Assembly's constitutional advisor B.N. Rao bringing together a great deal of data on foreign constitutions. Approximately 60 constitutions were consulted, were referred to, and committee reports were prepared on the basis of thorough analysis of all these reports. Preparing of a detailed draft constitution under the valuable chairmanship of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Okay. Now, committees comprised eminent personalities of India who had the experience of the field that they were working in the form of committee member. Total number of committees was 22, and each committee deliberated on specific matter for the making of constitution. Example, the drafting committee was a major committee that performed the painstaking task of compiling the reports of all other committees and formulating the ultimate draft of Indian Constitution under the chairmanship of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The members of this committee were Aladi Krishnaswamy Iyer, N. Gopalaswamy Iyer, Dr. K.M. Munshi, Muhammad Sadola, then B.L. Mitte, D.P. Khaitan, and N. Madhav Rao. D.P. Khaitan sir, later on he died in 1948 and he was replaced by another member, which we'll see in the later part. Okay. Major committee, Union Powers Committee, was headed by all-powerful Jawaharlal Nehru. Union Constitution Committee, Jawaharlal Nehru. Provincial Constitutional Committee, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. He was the man behind integration of India. Drafting Committee, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities and Tribal and Excluded Areas. Again, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Alright. Now, drafting committee, among all the committees of the Constituent Assembly, the most important was, of course, drafting committee. It had 7 members. Now, T.T. Krishnamachari, he replaced D.P. Khaitan because DP Khaitan sir died in 1948. Okay, now, now Dr. K.M. Munshi, we have seen these names earlier also. So let's proceed. A flowchart to help you memorize the various committees and their chairpersons and other members. Okay, mainly the chairpersons. So Committee on Rules of Procedure, Finance and Staff Committee, Drafting Committee, Credentials Committee, then House Committee Chairperson, then Order of Business Committee likewise. Okay, another slide to help you through. PDF will be uploaded on Jatin Verma, PW only IS. The QR code I have already shown you in the beginning of this lecture. You can scan the QR code and subscribe to that channel. Now, enactment of constitution was done after thorough 3 readings. First reading, the general reading. Like we see in the Constitution of India, there is a general reading, then there is a detailed reading, and then finally ultimate voting. Right now, B.R. Ambedkar introduced the final draft of the constitution on November 4, 1948. This is called as first reading. The assembly had a general discussion on this thing for just 5 days till November 9, 1948. Second reading, clause by clause consideration, which started on November 15, 1948 and ended on October 17, 1949. During this stage, around 7,500 odd 7,653 amendments were brought about. You can see it here. Okay, the third reading of the draft started on November 14, 1949. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar moved a motion, the constitution as settled by assembly be passed. Motion to adopt the constitution. Ultimately, the motion was passed on November 6, 1949 and received the signatures of the members and the president. Out of a total 299 members of the assembly, only 284 were actually present on that day and signed the constitution. Okay, this is also the date mentioned in the preamble as the date of adoption of the constitution. So 3 readings and the dates are important, especially in this year. Reasons are obvious. 2025. Okay, so the constitution as adopted on 26th November 1949 contained a preamble, 395 articles and 8 schedules. How many schedules are there in the now present day constitution? Please answer. Okay, enforcement of constitution. Some provisions of the constitution pertaining to citizenship, elections, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provisions and short title contained in Article 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Article 324, Article 60, Article 324, Article 366, 379 and 380. All these articles came into force on November 26, 1949 itself. The remaining provisions of the constitution came into force on 26th January 1950. This is referred to in the constitution as the date of its first commencement and celebrated as Republic Day. Now the question could be, what provisions of the constitution came into force on the date of adoption itself? Okay. Okay, on 26th November, you should be aware of these. Now, January 26 was specifically chosen to be the date of commencement because of its historic importance. Purna Swaraj was declared by the Congress party in 1930. It was celebrated following the resolution of the Lahore session of the Congress in December 1929 of the Indian National Congress. What acts did the constitution repeal? Constitution, with the commencement of the constitution, the Indian Independence Act of 1947 and the Government of India Act of 1935 was repealed, was deleted in a way. But the abolition of Privy Council's Jurisdiction Act 1949, whatever privileges the Privy Councils were getting in the form of pension, etc., this was retained to assuage the concerns of these Privy Councils. Okay, now Criticism of the assembly, the last leg of our lecture, it was not a representative body. Members of the Constituent Assembly, it is criticized to even this day that they were not directly elected by the people based on universal adult franchise. It was not a sovereign body, it was created by the proposals of the British government. So how could this be considered to be a purely independent body? It cannot be. Process was very time consuming. 1946 onwards till 1950, in the scenario of bloodshed, mayhem, poverty, destitution, so much of bad things happening around, it took 4 days. But we can positively say that that is why it has withstood the test of time. The constitution was drafted with a lot of thought having gone into it. That is why India as a diverse country still stands together. Unlike Nepal, which has drafted its constitution again and again over last 11 years, right? Dominated by the Congress. Granville Austin, a British commentator, constitutional expert who has written books on Indian constitution, says that the assembly was the Congress and the Congress was India. Okay. Politician domination. Lawyers and politicians were, there were a lot of them, right? Dominated by Hindus. So it is called as the Constitution of Hindustan, by the Hindus for the Hindus. Sometimes it is criticized like this. Okay. Now in the next lecture, lecture 3 for tomorrow, salient features of Indian Constitution. What features have we borrowed? Now starts the interesting part of this lecture, salient features. Preamble, borrowings of Indian Constitution, where from we have borrowed what feature, all these things we will cover in the next lecture tomorrow. Stay tuned for the same. It was really a pleasure going through this historic chapter, a very factual yet boring chapter. These first two chapters are considered to be historical context of Indian Constitution, and this one, okay, making of Indian Constitution. Nonetheless, I, as a teacher, Indian Polity faculty here at PW Only IS English, tried my best to take you through in a time-bound manner through all the important facts that went into the making of Indian Constitution. Let's hope to meet you again, and I'm sure you will look back into your book or previous year question bank for practicing the questions around it. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.